We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internets, how are you doing tonight? I am a little more jazzed than usual, maybe. Okay, I'm just hyped up about this war in Israel. How about you? Are you hyped? You hyped for this, dog? Yeah, let's go. Finally, someone we can feel good about mass murdering, right? Am I right though? I mean, they did kill civilians. So anyway, I'll stop with the sarcasm. It's been a rough week for a lot of people, and especially people in Israel. And my heart goes out to anyone who lost relatives or lost loved ones or is still missing loved ones. It's a terrible situation, and nobody's winning in this situation. So I thought we'd start tonight by talking about that issue. And the mainstream media's viewpoints are pretty well represented on this issue. And I'm not Jewish, and I have little firsthand knowledge of the conflict. So what I do is I rely on Jewish voices who I trust on other issues. And there are a lot of them, starting with Due Dissidents, but I'm not gonna reference them tonight. They've done enough. But tonight I'm gonna show some clips from Max Blumenthal, Katie Halper, and Aaron Matei, all of whom are Jewish, all of whom have dissenting viewpoints on, the situation with Israel. Like I said, the mainstream view is very well represented. So I definitely wanted to take some time to show, just basically other side the issue, if that's how you want to say it, both sides it, and just kind of show some viewpoints from people who aren't going to toe the line when it comes to this kind of thing.
Delusional.
We're on the side of the occupier.
Let me just start by fixing that. So there's a long history here, obviously, and the history starts with the end of World War II when Israel was created. Now, to my understanding at that time, there were some settlements, there were some agreements made, and those agreements have been violated. So that's the place that I start from. But I think that Aaron Matei and Katie Halper here kind of summed up very well what the kind of overall crux of the problem is in this clip. And so I'm just going to play it.
And so only occupier lives matter. So that's who gets our condolences. And that's who also gets the right to defend themselves. And notice how you'll never hear a U.S. politician say Palestine has the right to defend itself.
Right. The ones who legally do.
Yeah, the ones who legally do. Because if you're occupied, you have the right to defend yourself and to resist the occupation. And, look, the problem is because so much of the actual history has been buried, so many comments that seem benign, underneath them all is a whole series of basically of omitted context and falsehoods that obscure the real reality. So, for example, just take one example. Kirsten Welke there in that recap says that this could derail this ongoing U.S.-backed effort to normalize peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which is supposed to be some big diplomatic achievement that the Biden administration really wants because they need something for the re-election campaign. Much like Trump had the Abraham Accords, this is kind of their version of that. But what that obscures is that actually Israel, if it wanted to, could have had peace, not just with Saudi Arabia, but all the Arab states and also Iran and the
Now, this is something I was completely unaware of.
Palestinian territories more than 2 decades ago, because in 2002, the Arab League endorsed what's called the Arab Peace Initiative, which basically the deal was get Israel to withdraw from all the occupied territories, the West Bank and Gaza, let a Palestinian state be created there, have a just resolution to the Palestinian refugee issue, and in return, all the Arab states will recognize Israel fully. Hamas later on tacitly accepted this proposal, not formally, but they tacitly accepted by saying they would accept a state within the pre-1967 borders, which means you're not going to oppose a state within Israel's recognized borders of pre-1967. So even Hamas tacitly accept this proposal, and Iran also accepted this proposal as well. Israel, though, has said they'll never accept that because Israel fundamentally chooses occupation and supremacy over peace and security. They do not accept the rights of Palestinians, the indigenous people of the land, to be there. And accordingly, they want to keep the parts of the West Bank where they've installed millions of Jewish settlers, including people who come from places like Brooklyn and other places that are not native to Palestine. That's the fundamental problem here, which Israel never accepts. And that's why you have all these constant flare-ups of violence like this. The difference this time is this was unprecedented. This besieged population with cut off totally from the outside world in Gaza, and the Hamas fighters managed to do something like this. That was unexpected, but it all comes from the same thing, and it's all part of that context of occupation and rejecting peace that everybody else accepts, the terms everyone else accepts. That's the problem here, and that's why you have issues like this happening. And unfortunately, we don't get that explanation from these shows.
And they always pretend that had only the Palestinians done X or had only the Palestinians done Y, then ABC wouldn't be happening. And these are often things that Palestinians have already done. If only they tried to non-violently resist.
They've stopped saying the whole non-violent, like where's the Palestinian Gandhi thing now? Because that's a harder fiction to maintain, because in 2018, people of Gaza tried that with the Great March of Return. There's a great film about it by Abby Martin and Mike Presner.
This is a recurring theme.
They have footage on the ground. Unarmed Palestinians marching to the apartheid wall, getting gunned down with U.S.-made weapons.
Including medics, press.
Yeah.
People, snipers taking shots at these people.
So one of my first thoughts when I heard that, and call me a conspiracy theorist, call me whatever you want, but I don't know if you know this recently, but the whole Matt Gaetz and the speaker being ousted thing kind of holds up the funding for the Ukraine war, and there's a lot of people with defense stocks. And if that ends, those stocks tank. And I would not be surprised, don't rule it out. I'm not saying this is for entertainment purposes only, but I would never rule out the idea that, with the way that Gaza is monitored, they had to know that something like this was coming to some degree. And I've said this with 9/11. I don't think Bush did 9/11, but I think that they kind of ignored intelligence and kind of let it happen because they knew what they could do with the results of the crisis. And this is, if you've ever read Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine, this is a recurring theme for governments in the 20th century. This is the type of thing that is provably done again and again. So I'm not saying that's what happened. Like I said, this is for entertainment purposes only. That was a complete conspiracy theory. But I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility when you really think about, the past several years and the things that have gone on, So anyway, there's another clip that I want here that just kind of jumping around a little bit. Max Blumenthal was on Tim Pool, and one of the first things they talked about is this. There's a story that the Hamas people murdered a bunch of babies. And so listen to this exchange for a minute.
The elements, they've actually battled them in the streets in Rafah before. They consider them a threat to their stability, and Israeli intelligence actually has worked with Salafi elements in Gaza to destabilize Hamas, just as Israeli intelligence supported Hamas to destabilize the PLO when it controlled Gaza in the 1980s. So I would be shocked if they employed something like this. The only source so far on this story is one Israeli soldier who's a very interesting character. We've traced his identity at the Gray Zone. And
So
it comes
he's talking
through
about the
a
source for this baby story.
state-sponsored Israeli media organization, as you pointed out, I-24, the reporter Nicole Sedek, who just went to Kfar Aza and said, I'm hearing that babies were beheaded.
Right.
Then the Israeli Foreign Ministry goes and blasts it out. 40 babies beheaded. Why? Because the U.S. bombed the crap out of ISIS in Raqqa. We destroyed half of the city of Raqqa, and that's what Israel wants us to do to Iran. They want us to see Hamas as ISIS and then to get involved in their regional conflicts. So they're pushing this story. The source is a Israeli soldier named Davidi Ben-Zion, who is a settler leader. He's from one of the fanatical wings of Israeli politics, and he, he's a reservist. He's serving in the military. But he got in trouble earlier this year because he called for an entire Palestinian village to be wiped off the map next to his illegal settlement in the West Bank. And he's the guy that she's interviewing as her credible witness. I don't trust it. And as you said, Israel has enough to go on right now to try to portray itself, even though it's the occupier and besieger of the Gaza Strip, according to international law, to portray itself as a victim. Why do they need to do this? It's because they're trying to draw the U.S. in.
I agree with that for sure. Because that's why everybody immediately brings up the Near testimony. What will shock Americans to the most extreme degree to justify U.S. involvement?
You should break that down, though. Like
the Near testimony?
Yeah.
I mean, I can break it down. We have the Wikipedia pulled up. False testimony given to the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus, October 10th, 1990, by a 15-year-old girl who was publicly identified by the time by her first name, Nayira. The testimony was widely publicized and was cited numerous times by U.S. senators and George H.W. Bush in their rationale to support Kuwait in the Gulf War. In 1992, it was revealed Nayira's last name was al-Sabah and that she was the daughter of Saud al-Sabah, the Kuwaiti ambassador to the U.S. Furthermore, it was revealed that her testimony was organized as part of the Citizens for a Free Kuwait public relations campaign, which was run by the American public relations firm Hill and Knowlton for the Kuwaiti government. Following this, al-Sabah's testimony has become regarded as a classic example of modern atrocity propaganda. So it is false testimony. Her story initially was even corroborated by Amnesty International. So this is crazy. I mean, I'm a little kid. I'm 4 years old.
So that's the parallel they're making there, is that the Nayira testimony was one of the things that they used to get the Iraq war, get people behind the Iraq war. Oh, they're murdering babies. They're bayoneting babies and throwing them out of incubators. And it kind of worked. So a healthy skepticism is necessary when you hear these stories. And I say that because today, Max Blumenthal posted this, that the story was a fake and it has now been retracted. So this is what he said. The story's been retracted by the LA Times and the Israeli army has officially disowned it. Perhaps it's time to question the other propaganda set pieces Israel has deployed to falsely paint itself as the victim and drag the West deeper into its war of extermination. So that's just an interesting development, because I recorded these clips over the weekend. Well, not over the weekend, over the past couple of days. And I saw this tweet this morning basically saying that the story had been retracted or had been kind of pulled down. But the damage is already done. I've already talked to several people who believe it. They're not going to see this retraction. They're not going to hear it. Everyone already believes that this is true. A lot of people in the mainstream believe that this is true. So it worked, and that's, as sad as it sounds, that's, all you can say is that propaganda, especially in the United States, works. We are the most propagandized country in the world. So this is another clip from the Tim Pool show where Max talks about what he calls discriminatory logic. And it kind of goes back to what Aaron and Katie were talking about. Listen,
that you've got two factions that are going to use whatever arguments, whatever psychological warfare, whatever physical warfare they can to try and win this. And I know that there probably is a right side and someone's telling the truth. And I know for a fact there's an objective truth and lies to what's going on. I don't know how to navigate that.
Well, just 2 points on that. I mean, there's this issue of human shields. Like Biden said, Palestinians are human shields. That's a way of basically saying there are no civilians there at all. And the Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated places
Like
on
2
Earth.
million people.
There's like, it's 2 million people jammed. Why are they there? By the way, that most of them are refugees and they have to be there because they're not Jewish. They can't go back to the land of their families pre 1948. They keep having kids. They're being warehoused there. They're surplus humanity. So it's like the logic of a prison. And so everybody there is a human shield. But there was a place I like to eat because it was real cheap in Tel Aviv that was right next to the defense ministry called Hakiria. And all the generals would be in there, the intelligence chiefs, good Mediterranean food. Are they human shields? Is building this giant tower in the middle of a residential area in Tel Aviv, are they making those people human shields? If that gets hit by Hezbollah and people die nearby, were they being used by Israel as human shields? No one will say that because the logic is so discriminatory towards Palestinians. No one will consider their position. And then the other point I wanted to make is just about the use of violence in this conflict by Palestinians who have tried everything. I mean, I don't know if you know about what the Great March of Return was.
Aaron talked about this.
Sanctioned by Hamas, but it was a grassroots initiative in Gaza to just march without weapons like guns to the wall that surrounds them. And they were shot one by one in the legs. Many of them were killed. Journalists were killed covering it. It was a complete bloodbath. And that's when the society said, you know what, we can't win with this tactic of, walk.
So again, the stuff that Max is saying here and this about this march and the stuff that Aaron said, most people in America don't know any of this. And I'm realizing this now. I don't watch mainstream media, so I hear these kind of nuanced takes on this. But most people don't. Like you guys who are watching and me, we all watch indie media, so we hear this kind of stuff, but we are a rare breed, and it's kind of scary how easily people swallow this horse shit. I said something on Twitter about it where, a lot of the conservatives that I follow are accurately skeptical of the COVID narrative and, the war in Ukraine and everything. But with this, they just, it didn't even take them as they believe every single thing they hear about it without question. Everything they hear about it on the news is 100% true, and they don't question it. And we have these tribal blinders on. We all have these tribal blinders that, just kind of blind us to the reality of what's really going on in the world. So this next little bit I want to show you is this guy, Phil, on the Tim Pool podcast. I actually respect Phil. He's in a band called All That Remains. I think they're a great band. He gets a lot of shit. People call him a failed musician, but in this clip, he kind of takes he kind of like, it's great because he's kind of almost accusing Max of being anti-Semitic. And Max's response is just brilliant because, I don't even want to ruin it. I'm just going to show you. Watch this.
The way you've characterized this, you've called Jews terrorists multiple times, and every time that anyone talk, and then I talk about the fact that the operation was a terror operation, you push back on it. So I understand that you have a perspective, and it's totally cool. I'm not trying to say you're wrong for having an opinion or having a perspective, but I do want to point out you are characterizing the Israelis as Jews, and you talk about how far right and how bloodthirsty they are. And the terror attack, you've been pushing back on and saying, well, it's not a terror attack and et cetera. So, I mean, I just wanted to call attention to it. It is not just that Jews are terrorists or that the Palestinians are terrorists. This particular issue, this particular flare up or whatever is because of a terrorist attack, but it's not that one side or the other are the bad guys and the good guys. Or at least I don't see it that.
He's not wrong about this. It was a terrorist attack. They killed civilians.
For me, it's about justice and injustice. One side is much more powerful than the other and has been abusing them historically. But Israel, to me, does not represent Judaism. To me, that's that's an anti-Semitic point of view. And actually, anti-Semites try to implicate all Jews by invoking Israel's crimes. I see Israel as embracing the philosophy of Zionism. And if you go to Brooklyn and you see all those ultra-Orthodox Jews from the Satmar clan, they're not Zionists. In many ways, they're anti-Zionist. So all Jews are not Zionists.
He's right. And I just want to remind you, I brought this clip with me again. This is a favorite of mine. But I've shown it a couple times before, and I'm going to show it again because my boy Gene Simmons just nails it right here. Just let's hear this again.
Roger Waters, Pink Floyd. You're obviously Jewish. He's been coming out with a lot of Israeli, and he's been coming with a lot of very anti-Israel and what people perceive to be anti-Semitic comments.
I'm not sure that's the same thing.
Right, so
that's the same
what's your
thing.
position about Roger Waters?
Well, first of all, he's a very talented guy. He's written some of the most wonderful music along with Floyd, many, many decades. And it's obviously held up, and he's got lots of fans. There is something to be said for keeping your political and other beliefs off the stage. His choice is to use the stage as a platform to further his point of view.
That's his choice.
There is a difference between a political statement about Israel and about anti-Semitism. By the way, anti-Semitism also involves Arabs. The definition of a Semite includes the Arab world. So I think he's a well-meaning guy. I don't agree with his point of views, of course.
So do you think he's anti?
And so the point that Max made, I think, is such a relevant one, that anti-Semites actually use Israel to indict all Jewish people. But all Jewish people aren't responsible for Israel in the same way that all white people aren't responsible for Donald Trump. If you criticize Donald Trump, are you criticizing all white people? If you criticize Joe Biden's government, are you criticizing all white people? No. If you criticize Israel, are you criticizing all Jewish people? It's a leap in logic that's used to defend ridiculous things, and I don't like it. So anyway, I got one last clip to show you here for this segment, and it's probably the best one. And we're gonna jump back again to Aaron and Katie, and they pulled a clip from CNN. I don't watch CNN. From Fareed Zakaria. And he actually had a Palestinian leader on his show, and this guy
Palestinian voices. Instead, it was just basically a collection of neocons and even more hawkish neocons from the Republican Party. But in the case of Fareed Zakaria, he had on a few Palestinian voices, and one of them is Mustafa Barghouti. He's based in the West Bank. He's a longtime Palestinian politician, not affiliated with Hamas or with Fatah, the dominant faction in the West Bank. And he had some very powerful words.
You see today is a reaction to several things. First of all, settlers' terrorist attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank that has evicted already 20 communities in an act.
Did we start? Yeah. I made it. I wanted to start earlier, and then
of ethnic cleansing. 248 Palestinians who were killed by the Israeli army and settlers in the West Bank, including 40 children. Attacks on the holy sites, the Muslim and Christian holy sites by Israeli extremists, as well as declaration of Netanyahu that he will...
And I just want to say again, I'm not choosing sides here. I think both sides are doing terrible things, but this perspective is not visible in the U.S. media, except in small doses like this. This is a very rare thing.
Liquidate the Palestinian rights and the Palestinian cause by normalization with Arab countries. And he dared even to go to the United Nations and carried in the United Nations a map of Israel, which included the whole of the West Bank, all of Gaza, all of Jerusalem, as well as the Golan Heights. He declared the annexation of the occupied territories. So, of course, Palestinians turn to resistance because they see that this is the only way for them to get their rights. The question here is not about dehumanizing Palestinians as is happening and calling them terrorists. It's about asking the question, why the United States supports Ukraine in fighting what they call occupation, while here they are supporting the occupier who continues to occupy us.
And that right there is why these types of people don't get airtime.
Which Fareed Zakaria seems shocked by to hear that question.
Yes. Yes. Because you're not allowed to assert the Palestinians have equal human rights. The whole premise of Israel, it's based on supremacy. What did B'Tselem call Israel? Basically, state of it's a Jewish supremacist state.
Yeah,
yeah.
B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, by the way, which people people love to write off Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch as anti-Semitic. I guess B'Tselem must be self-loathing Jews.
Yeah, B'Tselem has been active for a very, very long time and is the leading human rights group inside of Israel. And that was their term, the Jewish supremacist state. And that's what Israel is.
Yeah.
Again, a criticism of Israel is not a criticism of all Jewish people. Just ask Israeli Jewish man Gene Simmons.
It took a lot of people way too long to recognize that, but at least it's acknowledged now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have more from Mustafa Barghouti.
Yeah.
Arrested, and that's the life we have. Look, Fareed, we have lived all our lives under occupation. My father lived under occupation. My daughter is living under occupation. We want a time when we, the Palestinians, will be free. Hamas was not there 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But before that, PLO was described as terrorist. Any Palestinian who struggles for his right or for freedom is described as terrorist. And the question here...
Interesting.
Do we have the right to struggle for freedom? Do we have the right to struggle for real democracy? Do we have the right to have normal democratic elections, which unfortunately Israel and the United States don't support? I think we are entitled to that. But the unfortunate thing, if we struggle in a military form, we are terrorists. If we struggle in a non-violent way, we are described as violent. If we even resist with words, we are described as provocators. If you support Palestinian and you are a foreigner, they describe you as anti-Semite. And if you are a Jewish person, and there are many of those, who supports Palestinian cause, they call him self-hating Jew. This should end. It doesn't make sense. We should all have equal life. We should all have peace. We should all have justice. And we should all live in dignity. The main way to achieve that is to end occupation, end the system of apartheid that I am sure no Jewish person can be proud of. Time has come for that, and time has come for justice and freedom. If we achieve that, there will be no violence and nobody will be hurt.
Amen to that.
Yes.
And so that's pretty much what I've got on this. I saw Keaton and Russell earlier saying that it's over. What can we do? I mean, I don't have an answer. I wish I did. And whenever I try to speak up,
Don't tase me, bro. Don't tase me. I didn't do anything. Ow! 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 Ow!
So anyway, I got a bonus clip for you here on Tim Pool's show. One of the commenters brought up what I've seen on Twitter quite a bit. Max's father, Sidney Blumenthal. Hey, Max's dad, Sidney Blumenthal, works for the Clintons. Ask him about that. So this is actually a really interesting exchange. Watch this.
Right there. It's right there.
Oh, there you go. He says, AB says, Ian, you do know that Sidney Blumenthal is Max Blumenthal's father, right?
Is he?
Well, that's why you brought it up.
No, I don't know. Are you guys related?
Yeah, he's my father.
Oh, well, so what's up? What you just talking crap about Hillary? Like they're tight.
Well, I don't agree, and I speak for myself. And
you don't agree with your dad, or you don't agree that Hillary?
I don't agree. with
I would be
Hillary Clinton,
nervous.
I was formally denounced by Hillary Clinton in 2016. You can look that up. I was denounced by Hillary. I was also denounced by the Trump campaign. I think I'm the only person to be denounced by both.
You got
So
level 4
Max's
plates
company,
over there?
Osprey, they were basically like, when we take Libya, let's make sure our
Man,
company
I
gets set
can't
up.
speak to any of that, but all I know is there was no company and no money that I know of. And I honestly, I can't speak for somebody else. I'm speaking for myself here. I don't agree. And like, I think Hillary Clinton is a dangerous figure. I made that decision. I spoke out in 2016. Jake Sullivan, who's the NSC director for Joe Biden right now, he authored the statement denouncing me on her behalf.
Wow.
And it was because she wanted pro-Israel money from her largest donor, who is named Haim Saban.
Denied.
My father's a complex figure. He helped start alternative media in the early 70s. His columns on the Iraq War are like vicious denunciations of the neocons. And in some senses, yeah, that work has inspired me, but I don't agree with him on other things. And I think a lot of people watching this don't agree with their parents on politics. So I just
fair point.
I'm just here to do my own work and to be judged on that.
I would love to have Max in here because I've talked crap about him before.
You mean Sydney?
He's Max. Oh yeah, Max. Sid, I'd love to have your dad in here if he ever wants to and talk about it. And we don't have to talk about Osprey.
He's got his 5th book on Abraham Lincoln coming out, so I'll invite him.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah, dude. Because I mean, war is the way of the world. I understand this now. I didn't before. It was like warmongers are evil. Stop. But now I understand.
I thought that was interesting that someone had the gall to call that out, and I liked that Max wasn't afraid to address it. So I thought I would share that as well. Anyway, moving on. I watch Rising sometimes. I know a lot of people aren't fans of Brianna Joy Gray. I've heard people call her, a class fake or whatever, but I think she does really good work. I don't always agree with her, and I think sometimes she can be, Due Dissidents played this clip of her with Finkelstein the other day that was interesting, which I won't get into now, but they had this bit about Pelosi apparently has a secret office in Congress, but the bigger point of this is what I want to get at, because what they're really talking about here is Matt Gaetz and what the Republicans just did in Congress. So check this out. Let's watch this.
Consideration as to whether or not they're even part of the conference.
So first of all, I didn't even realize there were these kind of special offices before this story. Yeah. So you seem to have some familiarity with this
guy.
So
they're usually reserved for.
I don't know who this guy is, but he's obviously some kind of a congressional insider. So listen to what he
leadership, very senior members. You probably could walk past the door, Bree, and wouldn't know. They're usually just like a random number on the door, and they're nice. They're usually in very nice places, in the chambers, very lavish, nice furniture. So if people don't know this, members have catalogs where they can sort of choose furniture and pictures to have brought into these offices. And the fact that Pelosi actually still had it, I was a bit surprised because she's no longer in leadership, but I assume because her and Steny Hoyer have been around for so long, leadership felt sort of respectful to sort of give them these places. And it's where they can have private meetings, bring very, very high.
And that, my friends, is why Dianne Feinstein stayed in Congress until she died. That is why these people, that's why our Congress are, as Bree calls them, I think in one of these clips, octogenarians.
Profile people. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, if I ever ran for office, I wouldn't mind having a hideaway office, Bree.
So, she made a statement about how because she is in California attending
a hideaway office.
The final resting place services of Dianne Feinstein, she wasn't able to pick up her belongings in a kind of a shady statement that suggests that she feels like she's being treated wrongly. This is an act of revenge, etc. But obviously, more important than the petty squabbles of who gets to put their lamp where in congressional office buildings is this question of what is going to happen to these 8 House Republicans who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy. So these people are Andy Biggs of Arizona, Ken Buck of Colorado, Tim Burchett of Tennessee, Eli Crane of Arizona, Matt Gaetz, of course, Bob Good of Virginia, Nancy Mace of South Carolina, and Matt Rosendale of Montana. Now, in the clip we watched at the end, The suggestion was, well, maybe they should be stripped of their committee appointments, et cetera. But remember, part of how some of these Freedom Caucus people got their plum committee assignments in the first place is because they held 15 rounds of voting for Kevin McCarthy in January. And in the course of doing that, not only got committee assignments, but the ability to do exactly what Matt Gaetz just did, which is to have one member of the House instigate this motion to vacate. So how now are you going to rein in that power and censor people when they still have this continued ability to do this as many times as they want to do it?
They do. And
yeah, so it turns out being called a terrorist by the mainstream press means that you're actually winning something. You're actually winning some power. So I didn't want to play this whole piece, but there's one more part of it where Bree talks about a double standard that the press holds people like Matt Gaetz to. And let's listen to some of this.
Want to support?
Exactly. That is the core of Vote Blue No Matter Who. And that is the hostage game that these corporate Dems and corporate Republicans have been playing for a really long time. And what I find to be so energizing and fascinating about what Matt Gaetz is doing is that he's flipping it on its head. And he's demonstrating that he's not the only one who could have been doing this. Conservatives, corporatists do this all the time. They hold up bills like Manchin and Sinema did that are going to be...
He's playing their game.
Good for the interests of poor and working people all the time. And there's never any of this grandstanding. Nobody really cares. Everyone accepts it. Oh, it must not be popular. When in fact, it's the very things that they're obstructing usually are the most popular, but we never really get that conversation teed up because those bills are never isolated. And the establishment figures in Congress get to say, well, we had to do bipartisan compromise. We're the good guys because we compromise. But they're always compromising on the interests of poor and working people. They're never compromising on the pipelines that are going to inure to the personal wealth of someone like Joe Manchin. They're never compromising on the environmental harms that pipeline immediately started to cause to the populations that objected to it being built. They never compromise around sanctions for Venezuela that are sending immigrants to our borders because of the economic disparity there, because the oil moguls in America don't want to compete with Venezuela oil.
But where is the president?
Again, say whatever you want about Bree. There's no one else in mainstream indie left media saying this kind of stuff. And I say mainstream meaning like the Risings, the Breaking Points, the TYT.
I actually agree with you on the sanctions thing 100%.
The people with artificially inflated
these
Democratic
corporate Dems and corporate
thing 100%. And some Republicans actually have argued maybe we need to relieve the sanctions. Like we got to do something to stop these people from coming into the country. But Bree, when you make those arguments, even as a conservative, as some members actually have in the past, then Democrats, not all of them, but some of them, including the president, say, well, they're othering this thing. They don't want those other people coming into the country. No, we can't just let any and everybody come into the United States as if we don't have our own problems. These things are
This guy's obviously a conservative.
Sustainable. Well, I don't think an anti-sanctions argument is being framed as othering, but I do think that there's something really telling here about the fact that there are overlapping political interests here among Democrats and conservatives. But look at how it's being framed. Even establishment Republicans are immediately saying, well, this is really the rebels are aligning with the interests of corporate Dems. No, in fact, it's the alignment is among the establishment members on both sides who want to have a speaker who agrees to a status quo that is broadly considered to be unpopular. But they're playing a shell game here, and I'm really fascinated to see if Kevin McCarthy can stick the landing and really continue to righteously expose
I think she meant to say Matt Gaetz, not Kevin
fact that there's only a bipartisan interest in the things that suppress the interests of poor working Americans. Now, I don't have a lot of confidence in his ability to do that. I don't think he's a real populist, but I'm hoping that he understands that if he's gonna keep the public on his side, he needs to keep highlighting the interests that are important to them, not just his own personal career's interests. We also have a bit of a breaking.
So the whole point of me kind of showing this clip is that's the divide. That's the real divide. The divide between the Pelosi's and the Feinsteins and the McCarthy's, the people who have been in Congress for ages and have everything set up the way they want it, and guys like Matt Gaetz who are coming in hot and actually doing things to shake up the status quo and, improve things, or at least attempt to improve things for his constituents, which is what he was elected to do. And when you do that, what happens? They try to frame you as some kind of you're mean, you're a Nazi, you're a meanie, you're a terrorist, they've smeared this guy with everything. So I just want to remind you what they did to the Bernie Sanders people back in the day. Do you remember this?
Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat. Two victims of this tell CNN they were so afraid of the online attacks they faced, they don't even want us to describe the circumstances for fear it would start up again.
Can you imagine that? One of those little things says lobbyist plant. Oh my God, someone on Twitter called me a lobbyist plant. And this is the game these people play every time. The decorum, the pearl clutching, they're shaking, it's decorum. Gates is breaking decorum because he's actually trying to change things in a positive way. And because of that, of course, he is a terrorist or a Russian, whatever you need to think he's a bad person. You know the drill. So I got more goodies for you. Jimmy Dore and Tim Pool were both recently on PBD podcast. And there's some great little bits from this. You should watch the whole thing. Really, like everyone should watch this because it's just and straight up, even watching Max on Tim Pool's podcast, I love to see this. You love to see it because we have, as Bree said, we have overlapping interests. There are plenty of overlapping interests, and we're so busy infighting about stupid shit that we can't unite to get these things done. That Rage Against the War Machine rally, which I covered in one of my early shows, is a great example of it because there's plenty of overlap. And as soon as people started to come together, these divisive little op people show up and go, oh, that guy's not for trans rights, so I can't march with him. Oh, that guy, he's not for, tax cuts. He's for tax cuts for the rich, so I can't organize with that guy. No, we need to take these things on an issue by issue basis. And kudos to PBD for, organizing these conversations. But also cheers to Jimmy and Tim Pool for participating in them. So listen to this. This is kind of the first little bit I want to talk about where they talk about Matt Gaetz.
All of a sudden, I think we all probably remember where we were at, where it said, well, McCarthy is fired. You're like, wait, what? Is this a mistake? Like, this is not possible, right? How did this, take place? And Matt Gaetz is going out to calling him out. You didn't keep your promise. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. And yesterday I asked him a question at your event that you had in Miami. I said, when you were doing that, when you were pushing him, did you actually think it was going to be a historic moment where this guy was going to get fired? Or did you just think you're going to scare him to have like a, publicity, TV, media reaction, kind of sharing your thoughts? And he gave his answer. But from your perspective, what are your thoughts about what happened? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Unpack it for us,
Well,
Jimmy.
this is Matt Gaetz is doing the exact thing that I championed 2 years ago when the Democrats had a slim majority, and I wanted the progressives, meaning the squad, AOC, and those people, to do what Matt Gaetz is doing to the speaker. They ran on doing that to Nancy Pelosi, and I said, you can't give your vote to her for speaker unless you get some concessions from her, and they refused to do that. And half the people on the quote-unquote left turned on me and said that I was doing something that was crazy. This came right from the DSA handbook. This came right from AOC's own campaign. She was like, we got to have a vote on Medicare for all. So that was my ask. My ask was you don't vote for Nancy Pelosi unless they give you a vote for Medicare for all on the floor, which is what Democrats have been saying they wanted for 2 decades, if not longer, since Nancy Pelosi actually in 1994 said she wanted that. So I'm like, this is something everybody agrees on the left. So they wouldn't do it. Matt Gaetz is not only doing that, he's not only challenging, but he's actually actually asking for reforms that progressives should be cheering for. He wants to have single item bills voted on. You don't want to put school lunches in with a border and Ukraine funding into the same bill. And that's garbage. And he wants that. And he's willing to get rid of McCarthy for that. I got to tell you, it was really inspiring to listen to his speeches. And I realized that, that's why they've made him into be such a monster. And now they're literally calling him a terrorist for doing that. And they're trying to make it look like somehow he's a maniac and the Republicans are out of control and chaos. That's exactly what someone's supposed to do. And Matt Gaetz, I don't think he takes PAC funding, and he raises most of his money through $200 or less donations, and that's why he's able to do this. And it's like, I don't agree with probably most of his politics, but I agree with him doing this, him getting those reforms in the House. That's what lefties should be screaming for, and it's really great what he's doing. He's made a fan out of me anyway, and I love his anti-war stance. Now, the only thing I hope he doesn't pivot and be pro-war on China, but doing this to stop the funding for Ukraine is a definite winner for him, and the American people are coming around to his point of view. So I think it's great. As a progressive and a lefty, I wish that the Democrats, the progressives, had half the nuts that he does.
There you go. And if you watch these shows and listen to these people talk, a lot of conservatives, it's not 1995 anymore. It's not 2000, not even 2005 anymore. A lot of them have come around, especially the libertarian types like Tim Pool. He doesn't care if gay people get married. He doesn't care if people want to be trans as long as they're over 18. These conservatives, these types of conservatives specifically, they're not the religious zealot conservatives. So it's a different animal that we're dealing with now. So one of the questions that PBD asked Jimmy, which I thought the answer to was very interesting, was how are you going to vote now that things are going down? And because I don't know if you've seen what's going on with RFK Jr., or Cornel West for that matter. It's both their campaigns are out the window. With the Israel thing now, RFK Jr., even Craig Pasta, who is one of his biggest backers, is like, nah, I'm out now. Lori Spencer, Do Dissident showed her, I'm out now. So it's a valid question that PBD asks Jimmy here. How are you going to vote? And listen to what Jimmy says.
Your show, people listen to what you have to say, and you're very passionate, and you break things down, and you're a true believer. You come across as a guy that's like, listen, I'm a regular guy that just got a lot of opinions, and here's what I'm going through. What do you think? What are you grappling with yourself for your vote in 2024?
Well, I thought I was going to support Cornel West, but I'm not going to support. I can't see that happening now. He's in bed with the same establishment people. He's got Peter Dow, who's a cancer on the left, in charge of his campaign, which is why he's flailing. And he just left the Green Party, so he's not going to get ballot access. So he's not really running for president. And that was clear to me when he came on my show. He didn't ask for my vote. He didn't ask for the votes of the people who watch my show. In fact, he looked like he just came on to pick a fight with me. And he can't stop saying that Joe Biden is the lesser of two evil with Donald Trump. So if you say that, you're undermining your own campaign, which led me to believe he's not really running. So I am looking forward to Bobby Kennedy declaring his independent run, because a lot of the stuff he says is really important to me.
And this was filmed before the Israel thing.
Like his stance on COVID, lockdowns, authoritarianism, and free speech. And, he says if you don't have free speech, you don't have democracy. And that's true. This idea that voting for Democrats, though democracy's on the ballot, democracy hasn't been on the ballot since 1980, okay? Your government was taken from you by corporations decades ago. And when are people going to get pissed off about that? The guys on January 6th weren't overthrowing the government. They were just protesting an election, just like the other half of the country protested.
Oh, we're going to get back to that point.
For 4 years and said another country stole our election. They were saying it was stolen by people. And they say, they were trying to that's Cornel West came on my show and he said, they were trying to overthrow the government and upset the peaceful transfer of power. Really, a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts wanted to go overthrow the government, and they forgot their guns. Isn't that weird? I thought I'd written it down: mittens, water. I forgot the guns. So
that's such a great point.
And now look what they're doing. So they're criminalizing their political opponents. That's what they're doing to Trump. They know he's going to win the election, so they're going to make him a criminal. And that's what January 6th was about. That's why there were so many FBI agents in the crowd, and they pushed those people into their.
We're going to get back to that.
Into the Capitol so they can set up this narrative, and they can make. And now they're using the RICO statute to prosecute Trump. A RICO statute which was invented to go after the mafia. Not only are they using it against their political opponents, Donald Trump, they're also using it against the people who are protesting Stop Cop City. So it doesn't matter if you're Donald Trump or if you're a lefty protesting the expansion of the police state, they're going to use the same RICO laws to go after you because the establishment criminalizes their opponents, and no matter if he comes from the right or the left, and that's the game that's being played, and I'm trying to wake people up to that. And not that I'm going to vote for Trump or I'm a Trump fan, but I can notice what they're doing to him, they're going to do to anybody who stands up against the establishment. That's the game now. That's what they did to Lula.
He's right. And so this next bit I want to show you is Tim Pool talking about the Ukraine war. And I included this because lefties should hear this. He lays this out immaculately. And I thought this meme was a good kind of primer for this. Nobody invades countries but me and maybe the boy. But listen to this. This one's a little bit long, but he nails this down so well. It's unbelievable.
Media cycle about the pipes in Flint, Michigan. And then it expanded after the Flint, Michigan pipes. The kids are getting sick. There's Legionnaire's disease. The water was bad. Then we learn it's bad in Newark. Then we learn it's bad in Pittsburgh. And all of these Democrats are coming out saying we must get funding to fix this. And now all these people are saying we must give this money to Ukraine so we can have war. And I said, I have a compromise. How about we fix all the pipes in Pittsburgh, Newark? Flint apparently is doing better, but let's build American infrastructure. Let's help the poor in our cities. Let's whatever education program, whatever healthcare program. Hey, how about the $250 billion or whatever goes here?
Just like I said, listen to that. Did you hear what he just said? This is a guy who is perceived as a right winger saying, let's give the money that we're dumping into Ukraine to a healthcare program or to help the poor. So, like I said, these are not your granddad's conservatives.
But the weirdest thing to me is to see young leftists on social media being like, we have to stand with Ukraine. I'm like, why? And, so I think the hypocrisy right there for me and the people I know, they're asking themselves, why did we spend all this money over there when we had a decade of water problems in our own country? But more importantly, when I pulled up the battle map a couple weeks ago of Ukraine, I was shocked because I wasn't tracking the on-the-ground stuff with Ukraine as much. I was shocked to discover that Russia won because they've been telling us over and over and over again that we're winning. Russia's decimated. They're conscripting people. They're in panic. And there's these videos of like the Ukrainian soldier flicking the cigarette and being like, "Love Ukraine" or whatever. And then you pulled the battle map and you're like, wait, so Russia secured the entire Donbass land bridge from the Donbass, the land bridge into Crimea, which was their stated goal. So I feel like every story coming out saying we are winning and let's go. And I'm like, Russia wanted to control access to Crimea. It's their access to the Mediterranean, through the Black Sea, through the Bosphorus, into the Mediterranean, because that's how they ship a lot of their oil and gas. And what the threat was to them was that if Ukraine joins NATO and the EU, it cuts off Crimea. Well, first of all, before all this in 2014, before Crimea was basically taken by Russia, and they had a referendum, call it whatever you want, the threat Russia's facing is we have the Sevastopol base. We transport a lot of our energy through here. If Ukraine falls to the EU and NATO, we lose access to the Mediterranean. We can't allow that. So first thing they do, they walk out of their naval base in Sevastopol and say, we're already here, actually, quote unquote referendum, take it. With the expansion of the war, they needed to secure access into Crimea outside of just the actual bridge over water, which we saw bombed not that long ago. Now I'm looking at this map, and we have it right here. Wow, Russia's secured land access into Crimea, which was my understanding was their stated goal. They're pushing past towards Odessa now, which is insane. And when I talk to neocon types, pro-war establishment types on the left or liberal Democrat, whatever you want to call it, they keep saying no. Vladimir Putin wants Poland. No, Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
And I was like, what strategic value does Vladimir Putin have right now economically? Look, you want to make the argument that Putin's 20-year plan is to invade Poland? Fine. But right now, what we're dealing with, this makes total sense in terms of bringing oil into the Mediterranean, competing with on the oil market. And you telling me that Vladimir Putin is a comic book villain who wants to take over the world means nothing. It says nothing about his strategy, nothing about where he's placing his troops. When I look at this, I'm like, oh, right. He wants the land bridge into Crimea to secure it so that you can't kick him out. He's gotten it. That seems like a military goal. It seems like Ukraine's lost this one, and we're dumping money down the toilet.
I mean, just nailed it all down right there. And you saw the map. I mean, you know, I'm not on the ground there, so I don't know what that looks like. I'm assuming that the information that they're citing is valid, but that's what it looks like. And I mean, Tim Pool here sounds like he should be on the left. So I want to show this one last clip from this, and it's another one that's a little bit long, but it's where they all talk about kind of unification, basically unification of the interests of, the working class, the overlapping political goals of the populist left and the populist right, and how we come together and what's dividing us. And so listen to some of this. This is really good stuff.
Several years ago that showed that white liberals talk down to black people and
white
conservatives
I got a little early.
And I'm like, I think that exemplifies this quite a great deal.
But let me ask you this. So when you were at Occupy Wall Street and you saw them siloing off into their little ethnic groups, right? When I see that now, I see that as coming from infiltrators, and that's exactly how the establishment wants them to organize, because if they organized all together, they would be formidable and they could oppose the establishment. But if they silo us off into LGBTQ and trans, and then to black and Hispanic and Puerto Rican and everything, so then we don't come together and we keep fighting. And that's all that DEI stuff. It comes from BlackRock. It comes from the top down. It doesn't come from the bottom up, which is what I was trying to impress upon to Cornel West when he was on my show. You're repeating the establishment talking points when you keep talking about white supremacy and LGBTQ and trans. They want you to keep talking about that. They don't want you to organize along class lines. So don't you think that's
You're right.
Go ahead.
You're right. The first
I think too, Jimmy's point here and why he was so mad at Cornel West is Cornel West should be reaching out to Trump supporters. A lot of Trump supporters that were at least the ones who were disaffected Obama voters, because they didn't vote for Trump because they're racists and fascists if they voted for Obama, right? I mean, you would assume that. Anyway.
The first weekend I was at Occupy Wall Street, there was a 60-year-old couple with an American flag behind them. They consider themselves constitutionalists. They weren't leftists. They weren't communists. They weren't DEI, none of that. They were libertarians. I met Luke Rudkowski of We Are Change. He's a free market, anarcho-capitalist kind of guy. He was down there too, because the message originally was the corporations, the big banks, and the government teamed up and screwed the American people over. And then there's that famous meme comic where you've got a bunch of people, there's this fancy looking room, a guy at his desk, and outside the window is a bunch of people protesting and angry, holding up signs saying, we're the 99%. And the smug guy at the desk says, introduce identity politics.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So, and I actually experienced the manipulation. I don't know how you find this one. You got to find like the comic of the guy at his desk, introduce identity politics. But there was a civil war at Occupy Wall Street. The East and West factions there was the General Union and the General Assembly. Mm-hmm. When everyone talks about Occupy, they only ever tell you about the General Assembly. There it is on the left. The General Assembly was the official narrative the media supported and got behind. And on the other side of the park, which would have been, I believe, the west side of the park, was
Rob,
General.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
It was the General Union. These were actual activists, people who are typically leftist, who are trying to find a way to organize. And here's the funny thing. Their organizing structure was based on the family. And these hippie lefty guys sleeping in a park told me the family is the most important political unit, which is really funny because you hear this from Trump supporters. And this is a leftist guy in all black, punk rock. And he said, here's how we want to organize. We all have tents. Each tent is a family. Our representative of our family will come and speak to the General Union about how we distribute goods. When they tried holding a meeting and raising funds, facilitators, they called themselves, showed up and took their meeting over in the most cultish and psychotic way. Anytime one of these activists would try and make a statement, the facilitators would go, mic check, mic check, mic check, and the whole crowd would start chanting mic check and just stop talking. Go to these activists. I'm in San Bernardino, Trump supporters and, quote unquote leftists. And I walk up with my camera and I was like, hey, you guys are protesting. Would anyone mind answering a mic check, mic check, mic check? And I say, and I stand there and wait, they stop. And then I'm like, do you guys want to answer? And the woman goes, mic check. They all yell, repeating, do not talk to anyone. And I'm like, it's a cult.
And it's been infiltrated and overtaken, and that's exactly that. I'm telling you, all this hate your neighbor stuff, it's all coming from the top down. It's not coming from the bottom up. And I think people are starting to wake. You know, when I brought a Boogaloo Boy on my show, because the Boogaloo Boy gave a speech about how he was with somebody from.
By the way, do you remember the movie Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo? If you don't, I'm showing my age. But look it up.
What's that, Antifa? And he was with some LGBTQ, and they all came together and said, well, "You're not my enemy. We're all brothers." And I was like, "This is amazing. I never even heard of a Boogaloo Boy until that." So I bring the guy on my show. We agree on like 6 out of 10 issues, and they're anti-war, they're anti-cop, they're all this stuff. And I was like, "Wow, this is really amazing." They're nothing like I was told, and so I never got an onslaught of hate, and I got smear articles written about me in New York Newsweek and everything, and it was because that's the only thing that scares them. And so when I started to figure that out, that's when I realized what the real game is. And I'm not going to hate my neighbor because we're politically different, because they don't have. Jimmy Dore Boogaloo Boy interview sparks outrage among critics. You're a sucker.
But you were not, Jimmy. You were correct.
Thank you.
There's a video of a Boogaloo Boy shaking hands with Antifa.
Yeah.
And they were trying to create this division narrative in the press and claim Boogaloo Boys were actually white supremacists.
And there's the exact opposite. Even the ADL said that the Boogaloo.
There's a couple people on Twitter that are such obvious dividers, such like this. There's a guy called the Eclectic Radical, and if you're on Twitter, you've seen him. Every time people start organizing something, this guy shows up. Oh, that guy hates gay people. That guy is a fascist. Let's keep going.
Boys were not racist, but the media conflated Proud Boys with Boogaloo Boys. Boogaloo Boys were a response to the Proud Boys. They wouldn't allow you to be racist and stuff like that. And then when they started censoring people off social media, no longer could the Boogaloo Boys police their own kind, because now you can't see what those people are saying. If they said something racist in public, they could see it. Now it went underground, and that's what they wanted. And that's a great way to infiltrate and again separate and keep everybody separated and hating each other.
But also, as for the Proud Boys, the media's lied completely about them as well. You don't have to like the guys. I mean, they're showing up to protests and whatever you think about them. But I was in I think it was Portland, and there was a planned march by a bunch of right wing group. I think it was Patriot Prayer, and the Proud Boys showed up. The Proud Boys' plan was, we're going to march to the city. That's all we're going to do. But they know Antifa is going to show up and act a fool. And the general idea is, well, we're allowed to protest. They're not allowed to act a fool. We're going to do our thing. There was a black Proud Boy, and I think this is on my YouTube channel. I think I filmed it. And as they're marching down the street, the Antifa guy started yelling the N-word over and over and over again at him, swearing at him and calling him a variety of racial slurs. And then this dude, he was a veteran. He was a black man. He just gets super angry, and he starts to walk towards the street to cross the street to the other side. And a white Proud Boy walks in front of him and grabs him and says, "Don't listen to him, man. Don't let him divide us." He's like, "You're my brother." And he grabs his hand. He's like, "You're my brother, man. Don't listen to them." And I was like, what the? I was like, the white and black Proud Boy doing the fist grab saying they're brothers while the Antifa guy is yelling the N-word.
You have this video?
I'm pretty sure I've seen it too.
It might have been a live stream, and it would be on.
What a moment.
But also understand, there was also a moment where these Antifa activists were screaming the N-word at ICE agents in, I think, Seattle as well. So
don't you think that half of the Antifa is infiltrated FBI people? Just like you see those guys dressed up in the khakis and the masks. Those guys are all feds.
All of them.
So
all of them.
If I do have the video of it, it's going to be a live stream from youtube.com/Timcast that I don't think we can find in 10 minutes, because these are like 3-hour, 4-hour long streams.
But you know what this is all reminiscent of what you're basically describing? You ever seen the movie Braveheart?
No, I didn't.
Never seen Braveheart, you guys?
Multiple times.
Okay, gotcha. So there's a scene, and this is essentially what you guys are describing, that the Scottish nobles, the Scottish lords, are sitting on top of a hill watching what they think is about to be a battle between Mel Gibson, William Wallace's crew, and the other tribe that they're about to fight against, and they're walking against each other. They're about to meet in the middle of the battlefield, and they're looking on with such just like amazement. Like our two biggest thorns in our side are about to go to battle, and they meet and they come right together in front of each other, and they think about to be a battle, and they go, hey! They slap hands like this, and you realize, holy shit. And in that moment, the Scottish nobles and the lords and the king, they knew they were fucked. Now that's essentially the metaphor for the establishment. Once you have MAGA and BLM, and you have the Proud Boys and Antifa, or you have blacks and whites or Christians and Muslims all sort of agreeing, being like, yeah, I'm not so sure about this, and they look towards the king, and the king realizes he has no clothes on, that's where you'll see significant change.
I don't think anybody has to agree or high five at all. I think all that has to happen is you're going to have a group of conservatives, you're going to have a group of Boogaloo Boys, you're going to have a group of BLM, whatever these groups are, and they're going to have their areas. There's going to be a neighborhood, a bunch of houses, and everyone's there is going to be like, the police aren't helping us, crime is getting out of control, the rioters are not political, they're opportunists. They're going to form a neighborhood watch group. Then then a few blocks away or whatever, there's a different group with a different ideology. They don't need to like each other. It's that one dude's going to be like, hey, I'm going to go, I know those guys are forming a group, let's go talk to them and see what's up. And then two guys are going to walk up, and it's going to be like, look, you believe a lot of weird lefty stuff that I don't care for, but I got no beef with you. Right? I just want to make sure my kids are safe. The other guy's going to say, you believe a bunch of weird right-wing stuff I don't agree with either, but I agree. I want my kids to be safe. So we won't fight with you guys. If you need help, let us know. We're going to do our thing. You do yours. That's where I think the king gets scared.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only thing that scares them, and that's why they keep doing this, all these culture wars to keep us distracted. And I think believe me, the establishment would be okay with any of those Republican candidates at that debate being president, including DeSantis. They love it, and any of the Democrats being. They just don't want anybody like Trump or RFK. They don't want anybody that's actually outside the system or who's going to challenge this.
Or Vivek. Don't forget about him.
Yeah. So Jimmy goes on to be like, I think they would be fine with Vivek, and they have a little bit of a debate there. But watch that. This is the whole conversation is great. And I just want to say, I like Tim's summation of how he thinks things are going to break down because it doesn't involve violence. And that is what scares me more than anything, is the idea of a civil war where we break down to the point where we're fighting each other. And that's what can't happen. Because once that happens, and I've said this before, that's when the boot comes down hardcore, and there's no need for it. There's many overlapping interests, as these types of get-togethers continuously prove. So I want to go a little bit deeper into the weeds on something that these guys were talking about, and that is the whole divide thing, the divisive thing, the what's the best way to say it? The basically, if you've seen what's happening to Russell Brand, or what happened to Scott Ritter, or what happened to Elliot Spitzer, or what happened to Anthony Weiner, or what happened to all these people, they get sex smeared. And as Whitney's about to explain to you, this is a very common thing in the political world. Sexual blackmail. Listen to this.
Why is it nobody else is reporting on this?
Well, I guess I don't really know exactly why that would be, but the silence is very eerie about major aspects of the Epstein case. It ended up being 1,000 pages because as I was writing about Epstein, a lot of the connections that came up, I was just, increasingly aware that a lot of people in the American public, a lot of the names I was coming across, most people weren't going to be familiar with.
Correct.
Banks like the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, or BCCI, the scandal that involved, or even things like Iran-Contra, people may have heard the name but don't really know what it involved. So I figured I was going to have to go back and sort of explain that to people. So that type of context is volume 1 of the book. And and also the history of sexual blackmail and how it's been sort of an undercurrent in some past political scandals in American history, and how in these sorts of networks in which Epstein was inhabiting, that type of practice and exploitation even of minors for those purposes was actually disturbingly common. So Epstein starts to look less and less of he's not an anomaly, basically.
Right.
By the time you get through with volume 1. And so volume 2 is sort of my effort to, dig up as much as I could, with stuff that's publicly available, really, about Epstein, and also his greatest benefactor, Leslie Wexner.
So the thread here, the common thread is, again, the kind of crossing of the aisle, or the unification, or basically the disregarding of the labels of left and right. Because this is Glenn Beck, and I used to think Glenn Beck was a nutbag during the Obama administration, because he had this chalkboard that he'd draw these lines between, and now I think he's probably one of the more sane people in the world, because he's pointing out these things. So this is kind of a really, I want to say it's a cute and touching moment. The banter here between Glenn and Whitney. So listen to this.
It's not important to me. What's important to me is your character and your work, which is phenomenal. So
in case you don't know, I didn't set this up very well. Whitney wrote a book about Jeffrey Epstein, a two-volume book about Jeffrey Epstein, and Glenn Beck. That's why Glenn Beck has her on.
I'm guessing you and I don't necessarily agree on policies.
Maybe, I don't know. I just, at this point, I think my politics are I don't want the government to be run by organized crime.
That's what
I think that's a starting point for most Americans. Let's start there.
Right. That's what I was driving to is there are big things on the table that no one's talking about. And
we're all focused on the little stuff they've used to divide and conquer us this whole time. And big things are happening. And basically we are being herded into a techno-feudalism, slavery. I don't know. There's a lot of different names for it going around, but it's not good.
Right.
And it's organized crime, running the show.
At the highest levels. And also evil. I mean, it's just getting so dark. And, I'm to the point where, can you give me 9 of the top 10 Bill of Rights? You know what I mean? Do you agree with those? Give me anything that is foundational. They're all being destroyed. All of them. They don't mean anything anymore. But those are the things that can bring us together. And they do. I mean, I'm sure you're called a radical conspiracy theorist. There's a difference between conspiracy theory and conspiracy facts.
Sure.
So I would call you conspiracy fact purveyor.
Yeah, I guess so, because conspiracy is a real crime, and it's happening, and it's been happening.
Right.
And, a lot of us are sort of fed this, when we're in school and stuff, sort of this naive, I guess you could call it a fairy tale version of history, where there's no corruption, everything's fine, the mob disappeared decades ago, nothing to see here, but that's not the real history of this country.
Tell me.
So that theme of kind of like we need to come together is present through a lot of these clips I have tonight. And this next one is where I got that caption, Whitney Webb thinks you're naive. So this is the last little one from this segment. This is the last clip from this segment I'm going to show you. And she just really nails it down here. Listen closely, libs.
Feudalism, and how do you create a class of slaves that cannot even cognitively rebel ever again?
It is why, these teachers unions said, we care about, minorities and everything else. They did more damage to a whole generation of minorities more than they did white kids, but they put kids in general into the into the gears of the machine.
I live in South America. The lockdowns there were brutal. Everyone was under house arrest, basically. You were only allowed out of your house twice a week with papers that you had to show to police. Each paper was good for like roughly 3 hours. And my daughter goes to daycare. She's 4, and she was thankfully, shielded from a lot of this and was able to have interaction and stuff. But a lot of kids weren't, and a lot of kids her age and younger are nonverbal. They scream, like instead of talking. I mean, it's devastating. And the fact that these people, act like it was for the children or for public health when, the evidence increasingly comes out and it wasn't, it was for something else. And I think it's increasingly becoming clear what that something else is and was.
What we're doing to farming, the ESG and World Economic Forum plan is evil. I mean, it seems an overused word. And it's one I swore off about 5 years ago. I said, I don't want to call things evil because it has to be evil is a different level. But when you're talking about controlling and dumbing down and enslaving and destroying, I don't know what other word to use for it. And they've gotten away with saying this is conspiracy theory.
Well, they just, I think that's, since the term really entered the American vernacular after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, it's been used to basically claim that if you think powerful people get together to discuss how to advance their power and keep it at the expense of everyone else, that they have any agency, you're crazy. It all has to be a coincidence. They never have any bad intentions. The people that, are the oligarchs that, fund our politicians and have ties with intelligence and have monopolies and, the technology that runs our lives and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, it's, I think at this point you have to be quite naive to think that's actually the case, but.
So how do people like the,
So that's pretty much the gist of it. You have to be pretty naive to think that the people with all the power have your best interests at heart. If you think that I got a couple more segments for y'all tonight. This next kind of transitional segment here is Glenn Greenwald did a kind of a recap on some stuff that I had no idea about from the 90s. It's basically a recap of, so all this stuff happened around me while I was a child. And before I go into this too, let me just say, yes, I started fucking with the vape thing. I hate it. It gives me a headache sometimes, but it's like something to puff on. So sue me. I'm guilty. I just wanted to atone for that. Because I'm kind of like low key, like, Anyway, this stuff about the kind of pursuit of white supremacy and domestic terrorism in the 90s is stuff that happened in the peripheral all around me in my childhood. And I had no idea kind of the subtext or the context of it. And Glenn Greenwald here does a really great job breaking it all down. So if you remember the Waco, Texas thing, he starts with that. And that's where I'm going to kind of start this off. So listen to some of the stuff he says.
Continue. Here is a news report from a local affiliate at the time reporting on what happened in Waco.
The flames may be out, but a firestorm of controversy rages on after the assault on the Branch Davidian compound. Officials are starting to look for answers after doomsday in Waco. This morning, investigators began sifting through the embers of the Waco compound, searching for the bodies of more than 80 cult members believed killed in the fire. In Washington, President Clinton says he gives his full support to the decisions made by the Attorney General and the FBI to end the siege. But the family members of those killed in Waco have bitter words for those they say must bear the responsibility for needless death. Under the blistering Texas sun, investigators comb the smoldering remains of the Branch Davidian compound. More than 80 people are believed to have died in yesterday's fiery conclusion to the 51-day siege, 24 of them children.
Now listen to the police and how eerily similar the things they say are to what's going on with the whole Israel-Palestine thing right
Today, the FBI said it's not responsible for the deaths.
Those children are dead because David Koresh had them killed. There's no question about that. He had those fires started. He had 51 days to release those children. He chose those children to die. We didn't have anything to do with their deaths.
The FBI said cult members didn't panic as tanks began to ram the compound, yet calmly, apparently under orders from Koresh, began to gather in an underground bunker and donned gas masks. Federal agents tried to help the few people they could see, including a man clinging to the roof.
And he finally fell off the roof. In exposing himself to danger, the HRT people gave out and put him out. He was on fire and saved him. Another woman came out who appeared to be disoriented. She went back into the compound. They got out and went to get her. So there was constant communication with everybody to try to get them to come out.
Only 9 people were rescued from the flames. As to why the FBI lost its patience after weeks of waiting, law enforcement officials revealed today that they had electronic listening devices inside the compound. Their eavesdropping led them to believe Koresh was becoming more violent and that intervention was necessary.
So again, you don't have to like these groups. These were 2 groups that decided to isolate, to live by themselves. The government couldn't tolerate that and used a lot of violence to try and end their ability to do so. And of course, you have the New York Times and most media outlets propagandizing in defense of the FBI, in defense of the government for what they did, and yet investigations revealed, as so often happens, that that was propagandistic lies. Now, one of the outcomes of Ruby Ridge, and especially Waco, was that a former member of the military, the U.S. military, who concluded that the U.S. government was waging war on Americans and that what he had learned in the military taught him that it was justified to wage a war back, planted a bomb at the Oklahoma City federal courthouse and killed 157 people, including a couple dozen children.
I just want to stop right there for a second, because I hear and I see a lot of people that are like, I'm anti-communist and I'm, calling everyone a communist or a fascist on the other side. You got the Democrats calling everyone a fascist and the Republicans calling everyone a communist. That's the kind of language that results in people like what Glenn was just describing with that McVeigh fool. The kind of people who are radicalized because they believe that the Biden administration's all communists coming to take over America, which is absolutely ridiculous. They are very much capitalists. They're very much political establishment people who have been in the country for a very long time, working their way to the places that they're in. And, again, it's like that kind of rhetoric is what activates people like a Tim McVeigh and to do insane shit.
And the minute that happened, the Clinton administration seized on that attack to insist that the gravest threat that the United States faced was one of anti-government right-wing sentiment and began demanding a huge series of powers, just like the Bush administration did after 9/11.
So what's going on now with the Biden administration is actually a rerun of the 90s, a complete rerun. Listen to this.
That would have vested the Clinton administration, the U.S. government, with previously unthinkable powers of surveillance and detention and monitoring, all in the name of this huge threat that they built up after Oklahoma City, but even really before. Here you see the New York Times article that is really right to the point. Clinton seeks broad powers in battle against terrorism as Oklahomans mourn their loss. They didn't even wait until the bodies were cleared from the courthouse before the Clinton administration began demanding powers. And the government engaged in a nonstop propaganda campaign about the dangers posed by domestic extremism. Here you see the cover of Time Magazine, back when Time Magazine mattered in 1995, rise of the domestic extremists.
I love Glenn's shade, back when Time Magazine mattered.
How dangerous are they? An inside look at America's anti-government zealots. They had really turned opposition to the government into a crime.
Keith Olbermann, what do you think about that?
Now, I'll confess that I have licked Joe Biden's dick all the way through since 1975.
Thanks, Keith.
Saying that these people who feared the federal government, who opposed the federal government, even after seeing what they did in Ruby Ridge and Waco, were terrorists. These were people who were not permitted to be free. The New York Times, of course, led the way. Here you see their week in review in 1995, Men at War Inside the World of the Paranoid. Quote, "We will never know what part of the shadows of rage and conspiracy Timothy McVeigh emerged from. The man charged with the worst act of terrorism in the nation's history is said to consider himself a political prisoner, telling authorities no more than his name and date of birth. But anyone who has leafed through the literature of self-styled patriot groups, sampled the worst of anti-government postings on the computer internet, or looked at hate tracks will find that there is an old root of paranoia that runs deep in the national cellar and has sprouted rage and conspiracy for generations. One current branch leads to the right-wing militias and a worldview that Mr. McVeigh was apparently exposed to and may have well shared in the months before the Oklahoma City blast. Even as a Republican ascendancy has shifted political discourse rightward, the militias accept almost as an article of faith that the government has betrayed the people, that its leaders are corrupt, and that the Constitution has been subverted."
So, thinking back to the climate at the time, too, the Republicans at that, the partisanship and the partisan brinksmanship, so to speak, was out of control even back then. I don't know if you there. That was the era of the Clarence Thomas hearings, Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, Newt Gingrich. The Clintons were the right wing. What was it? The right wing conspiracy, vast right wing conspiracy, is what Hillary Clinton called it. She was right. I mean, they went at the Clintons with everything they could. And in retrospect, you know, I've never been a right winger. I always thought Rush Limbaugh was ridiculously gross and awful, and Ann Coulter and all those people. But I also didn't know the subtext here of what the Clintons were doing. So I'll let Glenn finish.
Ross Perot has said some of the same things. But militia members and other right-wing extremists then go into another dimension, transforming frustration and alienation into a black and white world in which the forces of one world government are at the nation's doorstep, and the FBI and the federal government together are bitter enemies of true patriots. It is a world of hate and fear with a shared belief in the same sinister global forces, blinding disparate groups and individuals who have fallen under its sway. Do you see how none of this is new? How back then they were also attempting to say that anybody who fears the FBI, who thinks the worst of the federal government, is an extremist who ought to be stopped by the federal government, and they immediately exploited the acts of this one person in Oklahoma City to claim that this entire movement of people who dislike the federal government and distrusted the federal government and the FBI, and who saw Ruby Ridge and Waco as examples of government attempts to crush dissent, were somehow not free people exercising their constitutional rights, but were criminals. Bill Clinton, as his top priority, repeatedly exploited Oklahoma City and all of this anti-government sentiment to demand what he called anti-terrorism powers, exactly like the Bush administration did after 9/11. Here from the New York Times in May, just a month or so after Oklahoma City, Clinton assails effort to change his anti-terrorism plan. Quote, "The president expressed particular concern over opposition to 3 of his recommendations, which would expand wiretapping authority, ease the ban on military involvement in law enforcement, and require that materials that can be used to make explosive devices be tagged with particles to make them easier to trace."
Oh, the Uniparty. Oh, the Uniparty.
But backed by a bipartisan group concerned about infringing on the civil liberties of domestic political groups, the Republican plan does not go as far as the president wants in expanding wiretapping authority. Mr. Clinton's public approval ratings have risen significantly since the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19th, and the White House is eager to keep the initiative on an issue that makes the president appear tough. Mr. Clinton particularly cited his proposal to allow investigators to conduct wiretaps on suspected terrorists who move from telephone to telephone, or roving taps without obtaining a new court order each time. That's one of the things the Patriot Act ended up doing. Quote, I don't care whether a terrorist is trying to knowingly evade the police. I care that he or she may be trying to plant another Oklahoma City bombing, he said.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why Glenn Greenwald is a right-winger. And you see these headlines, these MSNBC type people, these libs, the brunch libs, want to equate any criticism to far right and make you think that Glenn Greenwald, Tulsi Gabbard, and Matt Taibbi are evil people who want to subvert democracy and work with Russia and whatever you need to believe to discredit them. And this has been going on way longer than even I understood. So good on Glenn for kind of pointing that out. And that's going to move us into our next segment, which, boy, this one is a banger. Let me tell you. Do you know who Steve Schmidt is? Well, Steve Schmidt is the founder of the Lincoln Project most recently. That's the most recent notch on his resume. Before that, he was a McCain and George W. Bush staffer, campaign manager. He is also a regular on Rachel Maddow. I don't know if he still is. He's an MSNBC employee. He's been on MSNBC for years. So that kind of gives you an idea, again, of what MSNBC is. It's basically a neocon molting house where they, go in as neocons and come out as shiny new Democrats who support war and censorship. But again, after Glenn's little retrospective there, the Democrats have always been on board with this, it seems like. And this is something I was even kind of unaware of because Obama did such a great job of glossing over all of this stuff and making us feel good while he was doing the stuff that, continuing the legacy of the Clinton administration and the George W. Bush administration, right? So this next clip is a long one, but it's a really good one. And I want to set it up for you. It's Steve Schmidt on PBD again. PBD's been having some good conversations. So I got a little bit of content from his wheelhouse, but this is great because in the comments, it was so funny. People like, why are you platforming this guy? This guy is an idiot. No, this is fantastic because it starts by PBD kind of calls him out, Steve Schmidt for being a grifter. And then he pivots to January 6th. And Vinny, one of the guys on PBD's team here, loses his mind. And I didn't get the whole thing, but you're gonna see some of this. He's got like veins in his head pulsing. Anyway, you got to watch this. This is fantastic television or podcast, whatever you want to call it. It's fantastic. And kudos to PBD.
You're this, you're a fascist, you're that, dude. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
So good.
It was so divisive, starting with the media, doing whatever they could to destroy one guy, his reputation, his life. Now what they're doing, they're saying Mar-a-Lago's worth only $18 million.
So as he's saying this, like you could just feel the steam building under Steve Schmidt's shirt because he hates Donald Trump because Donald Trump forced him into the Democratic Party.
It's not the proper evaluation of Mar-a-Lago's $18 million. You're talking about Mar-a-Lago's $18 million. Mar-a-Lago's a $500 million property. It's only worth $18 million. So the more and more they do stuff like this, you know what makes the average person think about? It makes me think about they're targeting this guy. They hate this guy. They envy this guy. Yeah. They're upset at this guy. Maybe they hate the fact that he's loved in ways that they'll never be loved. Maybe they hate the fact that he gets
that's not what I think. I think that they hate him because he jumped the line. In politics, you have to be a Joe Biden. You have to pay your dues and suck all the dicks in Washington for 30 years before you get to be the president. And Trump didn't do that. He just jumped in and won, and that's why they hate him.
From his followers, because I don't know if anybody on the left, aside from Obama, I think Obama's followers love him. There's people even on his side that voted for Obama that say after I thought he was going to be Obama, he didn't do as much for my community as I thought he was going to do. There's a lot of people on the left that have said that about Obama. But Obama has people that love them. And Trump has people that loved him. And a part of me makes me think, there's a level of envy for how much support this guy gets. And then your side, you're sitting there and you're okay with Hillary saying there's going to be fraud in 2024 election. Or, we probably lost in 2016 because there was a Russia collusion. There wasn't. Maybe they tamper here and there, but it's not like the dossier she wrote, $35 million. And what does everybody do? Nah, it's okay. Let's just move on to the next thing. This isn't that important. Credibility is lost. Then with Lincoln Project, it's interesting where you are right now with Lincoln Project. So Lincoln Project comes out and says, Trump is this and Trump is that and Trump is this. I think you guys won. Okay, what your mission was, you won. Mm-hmm. So credit to you guys. You had a mission, you accomplished your mission. Yep. Respect, you did your mission. You could be an enemy, you could be a formidable enemy, but kudos to you for preventing him from getting reelected.
The book he has on the shelf is Choose Your Enemies Wisely.
You can use the word gaslight, whatever you want to put. You drove a lot of people from not voting for him. Worked effectively. Yet at the same time, here's John Weaver, one of the founders, is up there saying, we have to go back as the Republicans to respect men of character because Trump's not a man of character. I'm saying, like, wow, man of character. Then what? A year later, 2 years later, this guy's getting accused of 21 young boys under the age of 18 and one 14-year-old that he's exchanging messages with saying, I want to see private parts or private pictures. And he says, I thought it was consensual. What do you mean it's consensual with a 14-year-old boy? You're talking about character with a Trump, and then you're doing this. You realize how hypocritical. By the way, you resigned. You came out and you said some words about it. You realize how hypocritical that is of a project like that I'm supposed to sit there and think Trump's got character issues, yet Weaver's got that.
By the way, one of my biggest memories of the Lincoln Project, I don't know if you remember this, and I didn't pull a screenshot of it, but they put fake white supremacists at the governor of Virginia's campaign, and they got busted doing it. But they lined up a bunch of fake white supremacist guys with tiki torches at the Republican governor of Virginia's campaign. I think he ended up still winning anyway, but that's the kind of shit that this guy does.
What kind of character issues?
That's confusing. So PBD making him squirm like this is great to watch.
I'm gonna sell your confusion.
Tell me.
I'm not defending that piece of shit.
Okay.
Number one. Two, though. New York Times writes a story about his secret life. The 14-year-old that he was texting, he didn't do that on the Lincoln Project. He did that when he was working for John Kasich in 2015. Now, I don't blame John Kasich for that, and I don't blame the Lincoln Project for it. Had a fucked up guy. The incredible thing about it is the lead correspondent for the New York Times, in writing, acknowledges she knew about the guy having a secret closeted life. It wasn't kids. It was adult men. And
listen, I'm past the point where I fucking care about people's sex lives as long as they're doing legal stuff. The guy texted a young boy, whatever, as long as there's no proof that he like touched the kid or like was rapey to him or whatever, shit happens. Like I can forgive that. I get, it's not a good look, but he didn't do anything other than send a text as far as they know. So anyway, let's keep going.
I didn't know. I'm not a closeted gay guy. So I had no idea. Never saw him physically at all during the course of the Lincoln Project. He was never physically with any person.
There's a lot of people that said for decades, you guys all knew how dirty of a guy this guy was.
I just told you, right, that I have no idea. I have no idea what any of your sexual orientations are.
Watch this guy squirm. It's so good.
John Weaver, though, wasn't the president of the United States.
Yeah,
John Weaver.
That's his excuse. Yeah, Trump didn't text any 15-year-old boys.
is a political consultant who held no position of public responsibility. Okay. I want to come back to what you said about 9/11 now for a second. I guess it's a bigger thing. The passengers and crew of United Flight 93.
Okay, listen to this.
Were the first.
This is so great. This is why I love this, because remember what they were talking about? Listen to how he pivots right here. He just like takes that hey, you employed this guy who was kind of shady and like texting young boys and low key like doing shady stuff. And he pivots to 9/11. Listen to this. This is so good.
Americans to fight back on that day. They took the plane back from the terrorists and they crashed it into a field in Pennsylvania.
Where did this come from?
To save the United States Capitol from destruction. The attack on the Capitol on January 6th was a desecration of that sacrifice. Oh my God. It was a desecration of the sacrifice of every American. And it was specifically a desecration of the sacrifice of the men of the 1st Minnesota at Gettysburg who prevented the Confederate Army and the Confederate flag from entering the capital of the United States.
Do you think he's drunk?
Through basically a suicide charge. We have in this country a violence in our politics now, a rising anti-Semitism,
There it is.
mainstreaming of white supremacist extremist groups that are an open part of the Trump coalition.
Remember what we just watched Glenn Greenwald talking about with the long history of using domestic terrorists and that threat as an excuse to take away people's rights to free speech and other things?
And it's unacceptable. There's a whataboutism that comes up with Hillary Clinton and any one of a number of other people that I don't get. I'm not a Hillary Clinton supporter politically.
Yes, he is.
Wouldn't have been my first choice.
He's going to choose whoever is establishment. The guy works at MSNBC. Come on. Who does he think he's fooling?
I voted for against Donald Trump.
There you go.
I mean, what type of crack pipe are people sucking on if they think that the country would have been
shoots a glance
where
to
it
the
is
right.
today if Hillary Clinton had been elected president of the
To his
United
left,
States?
Actually, he's facing it.
Wait, you're
To
saying
my
it would have
right,
been better if Hillary would have been president?
Than Trump?
Yeah.
In 2016? Of course. Of course. Of course. Because
I belong to the political establishment.
Move on to the next thing. This isn't that.
God damn it.
The attack on the Capitol, any one of a number of other guy.
You mean the establishment would have?
Hold on.
Where it is today, if Hillary Clinton had been elected. I voted for against Donald Trump, but I mean, what type of crack pipe are people sucking on if they think that the country would have been where it is today if Hillary Clinton had been elected president of the United States?
Really?
Wait, you're saying it would have been better if Hillary would have been president?
Than Trump?
Yeah.
In 2016? Of course. Of course. Of course. Because
we'd already be
here and there, but it's not like
6 years into the Ukraine war.
Because the democracy would not be threatened.
What? This guy is drunk.
The democracy would not be threatened. You have a guy.
You mean the establishment would have been not threatened and
Are
protected?
you troubled by the fact that he just called for the execution of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff?
Okay. This is something I need to look up because this guy seems very outraged by this, but I need to see a clip of this. This is what they do to Trump.
Does that bother you?
You're saying Hillary Clinton.
I love how he
Does
just
it
ignores
bother
the
you
question.
that Donald Trump just called for the execution of a 4-star general, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? He just called for him to be killed. Do you think he doesn't mean it?
The fact, Steve, you lose credibility when you say 2,977 people died is less of an event than one person dying on J6.
That's not.
When you say that, you've already.
That's not. You're manipulating what I said, twisting it. What I said was January 6th was a more severe attack on the United States. September 11th had more casualties.
What world do these people live in where January 6th was comparable to September 11th?
There's a difference.
How do you measure worse? There's got to be data. You said you're a data guy. Data says one event we lost nearly 3,000 people. One event we lost one.
We lost.
The average person, they're going to say, of course, 3,000 is going to be worse.
Because
than
I
one.
guess I'm counting the 600,000 that died in the American Civil War, and I'm counting the 405,000 that died in the Second World War, and I'm counting the 50.
Because I'm trying to inflate a fake threat of white supremacy since I don't have anything else to talk about.
1,000 that died in the Korean War, and I'm counting the 58,000 that died in the Vietnam War, and I'm counting the acts of sacrifice that go back to 1776 that were desecrated on that day, incited by a single man who assaulted the Constitution of the United States. We were attacked by a foreign enemy on September 11th of 2001. The casualties were horrendous, as they were on December 7th of 1941. But the attack on January 6th was more severe also than the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Well, some would call it attack, but from the videos that we saw, Steve, from Twitter and just undercover cameras,
This is where it starts to get
didn't
real
look like an
crazy.
attack. If
What are you talking about?
I'm just talking about all the videos that we've seen, the undercover.
What do you mean all the videos?
All the videos on Twitter.
Well, all the videos on Twitter?
Yeah, hold on.
Are you guys going to really sit here and fucking tell me that the attack on January 6th didn't happen?
Bro, I work at MSNBC. We ran all kinds of the same footage reels over and over again to prove that it was a real insurrection.
That the violence, the bludgeoning of the police officers didn't happen
Hold on.
because of some bullshit on Twitter.
Hold on.
No one's saying that didn't happen. This guy gets super emotional.
Get the fuck out
Steve,
of here.
I'll give you Steve, I'll give you my opinion, and then you could talk. First of all, it's not
an opinion.
Hold on.
It's not an opinion. It's a bullshit conspiracy.
All right, time out. I'm not only a fucking New Yorker, I'm a veteran. For you, time out.
Yeah.
My sister's a veteran. My brother's a veteran. He's a veteran. For you to listen to me. For you to say that January 6th compared to 9/11 that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Hold on. Let me finish. Number one.
Thank you.
It wasn't an attack. It looked like a guided tour. Okay? That's what it.
You're a fucking nut.
Are you? Yeah, you fucking ain't right. I am. It was a guided fucking tour.
I will give Steve Schmidt credit for not walking out of this because it gets pretty heated.
Guided tour.
You think
a guy beating the cops?
What?
With all the violence?
Who died? Who died? Ashley Babbitt, a veteran, they fucking shot. The Capitol Police shot her ass. Where the fuck is that guy getting in trouble? You're just upset because Donald Trump said, you know what, they probably cheated. You don't think he has a leg to stand on that they fucking did it in 2016? Hillary, Russia, FBI, colluded. Are you how are we fucking crazy, Steve? How are we crazy?
I mean, this is going to be on video, so I mean, you're going to speak for yourself.
No, I'm going to speak for myself. Yeah. 19 terrorists took 4 commercial flights, crashed them in the World Trade, crashed them in the Pentagon, did all that. Yeah. Okay, and you're saying that, and we've lost, by the way, for how many decades of wars, we've lost over 1 million people from the Iraq War, which is all bullshit, all a lie. 1 million people.
We lost 1 million Americans in the Iraq War?
No, we lost. We killed people because we said there was weapons of mass destruction. We lied. Bush lied. Oh yeah, there's weapons of mass destruction there. There was no weapons of mass destruction, but we were like, oh, we changed the name since we're here, enduring freedom, which is bullshit. Okay, so as a veteran, as an American, as a New Yorker, for you to say that one day compared to that is absolutely absurd.
This made me appreciate Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan doesn't get emotional like this. He's very good at staying calm and asking people questions.
Steve, I understand that you love this country. I'm not questioning your patriotism, but the hate for one guy because he loves this country so much.
He loves the country.
Bullshit. He does.
God, you're a fool.
How am I a fool? How am I a fool? You have Trump derangement syndrome. You just hate him. You just hate the guy.
You are taken in by a con man.
No, I'm not. I guess
he
what?
Loves
I'm
the
not
country.
a Republican.
Trump loves the country.
You damn right he does. He's been saying it since the 80s, 90s on Letterman.
I mean, how just logically, Donald Trump has been made insanely wealthy. He's had an incredible life. Why would he hate the country? It's that on its own is a ridiculous premise. The idea that Donald Trump hates America, that's neocon shit. You hate America if you don't believe like me.
And all these
He's a guy on September 11th who went down, said he was down there. He wasn't. He's a guy who called in on a radio. He said, now I got the tallest building in Lower Manhattan. He's a guy who lied about Muslims cheering it in New Jersey from Jersey City. He is a...
Yeah, he's an egomaniac. We know that.
Con man. He is a liar. And that you have fallen for this bullshit.
And Joe Biden is an upstanding moral person who's so full of character and joy.
I'm not falling for anything, Steve.
Please.
Steve, how about this, Steve? It didn't have to be Trump. What I love is that this dude sacrificed everything to pull back a curtain and tell the regular American.
What did Donald Trump sacrifice?
Time out. Guess what?
Did Donald Trump sacrifice?
His career, he could go to prison. He could go to prison for what you guys want.
I gotta say, despite him getting insanely emotional, Vinny is right. Like he's kind of nailing it.
For the rest of his
shouldn't
life.
have broken the law.
No, Steve, you know what it was? Steve,
Broken
don't
the
give me this breaking the law
Espionage
bullshit.
Act, huh?
He pulled open a curtain and let all of us see. The regular people, look at what these assholes are doing. Fake news, fake this.
Are you talking about the shower curtain where he had the country's most sensitive secrets?
Oh, you mean no?
This guy's good. Steve Schmidt's good at getting under his skin.
But Biden doesn't bother you? But Biden doesn't bother you?
Right,
they all take documents home. They all take that. Hey, hold on. Were we in better shape now than when Trump was in? Are you happy with what's going on? You and your Lincoln Project, but mind you, the biggest hypocrites, you guys were going after him for Russian collusion and tax evading. That's what you guys were doing. All your people. You were the only one that was innocent. The rest of them were perverted. One of them was a Russian agent. One of them was a Russian agent. One of them owes $390,000 in a tax lien in his house, and the other guy went to court from American Express for not paying his $30,000 tax bill. You guys are the biggest hypocrites. The biggest hypocrites. You guys hate the man. You guys just hate the man. But the policies and what he did for this country, I'm happy. Listen, it didn't have to be him, Steve. It could have been a fucking turtle. He woke us up. He told people, hey, look at this curtain. Look at what these assholes are doing. Fake news, and it's all bullshit. And he sacrificed it all for us. Plain and simple, Steve. Say what you want. Say what you want. You're talking to a veteran that whole family fought for this country, and my parents are immigrants, and I'm a New Yorker. For you to compare those two is fucking asinine. The only girl that died was a veteran. The Capitol Police shot her. You said bludgeoning? Who died on January 6th? Who died? Who died?
Well, we have multiple suicides from
Give me a
police
fucking
officers.
break. Give me a break.
We have a lot of
multiple
damage.
on January 6th in the Capitol. Who died?
I'm
passionate because I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth, Steve. You're the one. You were cussing and talking shit. You're not going to do that shit with me. I'm sorry.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah, go ahead.
You are sitting here lying to millions of people about what happened on January 6th.
I'm lying.
Which was an attack on the country incited by the president. Watch the fucking video.
Is he in jail for inciting violence?
He will be soon.
Is that the video? Is that the video where he's like, go peaceful?
Yeah.
He's like, go in there, be peaceful.
That's
don't
what
do shit.
happened.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You guys
And
hate the person.
You guys don't seem to be a whack job like this guy.
Yeah, I'm a whack job.
But you know what it is?
Why don't you go back to your home on Whore Island?
So there you go. Steve Schmidt, MSNBC's Steve Schmidt, just gets called out on being a grifter and instantly pivots. Like hard pivots into 9/11 and January 6th, and then gets yelled at by Vinny. Brilliant. Absolutely entertainment at its finest, I would say. So this last segment, I want to show you something that I think is interesting, and you can take it for what it's worth. I just want you to know that, full disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes only. Entertainment purposes only. Keep that in mind. And so when I do this show, I go through a ton of video footage, and, I go through a lot of stock video footage when I'm editing videos together. And I found this piece of tape that just kind of like blew me away, because And I cut it together so you can see what I saw. And you know what? I'm just going to play it and you tell me what you think. Here we go.
Into the Capitol! Into the Capitol! Peacefully! Fed! Peacefully! Okay, folks, spread the word. As soon as the president's done speaking, we go to the Capitol.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
So that's the part of the whole January 6th episode that your boy Steve Schmidt doesn't seem to have a handle on. Let's put it that way. And I just wanted to show that because, again, that footage, I mean, a lot of guys look like that, but that is just uncannily very close. And before I leave tonight, you know, I always like to end on something funny. So I just want to show you this piece of tape real quick before I close out with something even better.
What are very racial policies.
The ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL. ADL, shut up.
They run all the censorship and everything.
They don't run anything. They're played out. We run the streets.
Well, I'm singling out the ADL. So
we don't know who they are. No one in high school knew what the word anti-Semitic was until Ye made it popular.
No, I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail. Nick, you want to comment here?
Definitely a tiger by the tail. I love that clip so much. I love that clip so goddamn much. Anyway, thank you for hanging with me tonight. We're at just about 2 hours now. I'm going to close out with, I am a failed musician, just so you know. And so I that's my thing. That's what I do. I make music. And I dug up this video I made quite a while ago. And just to kind of prime it for you on my way out here, it's called Digital Drugs, and it's based on it contains actual footage from an Oklahoma news report about something called digital drugs, which is supposedly this thing that you can download, like an MP3 sound file that like makes you feel high, and that kids are downloading this stuff. And so they did this whole report like, kids are using digital drugs. Parents need to be aware of digital drugs. They're coming for your kids. Watch out. America, digital drugs are coming. So I put this together and I think it's pretty brilliant. And I'm gonna close out on that. But I just want to say thank you all for tuning in. If you're doing it, like and subscribe, all that fun shit. And I'm gonna keep at it. I've been trying to do shows on Sundays, and I don't always get to it. There's a lot going on. I'm sure you can relate. But I'll always be here Wednesday. That's my night. Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Tune into the Politics show. Keep tuning in. Thank you. I love you. Not in the way you're thinking, though. I want to have sex with you. Okay, that was kind of dirty. I'm just kidding. But for real, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this outro clip. Digital Drugs by yours truly, Dustin Rogrimes, a.k.a. DJ Side Effects. Have a good night, y'all.
websites are luring kids with free downloads of so-called digital drugs, which are audio files designed to induce drug-like effects.
To experience these digital drugs are headphones, their computer, and an MP3 player. Demons into a MP3 player. Digital drugs. All kids need to experience these digital drugs are headphones, their computer, and an MP3 player. Like some weird like demons into a iPod or something, and he was just freaking out. He was just freaking out. Demons. He was just freaking out. He was just freaking out. Demons to a iPod or something, and he was just freaking out. All kids need to experience these digital drugs are headphones, their computer, and an MP3 player. Digital demons.
Audio files designed to induce drug-like effects.
Digital demons.
Audio files designed to induce drug-like effects. Drug-like effects.
I heard it was like some weird like demons into a iPod or something, and he was just freaking out. Digital demons.
Kids are going to flock to these sites just to see what it's about, and it can lead them other places.
I'm a stud. I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone. I smoke my stogie anywhere I want. I don't have to find a hideout place like you.